Hi everyone, my name's Pieta Valentine. I've written 2 books, The Resident's Voice from a Dementia Unit and The Resident's Rise from a Dementia Unit. Today's session is on the wife's first visit to a dementia unit, visiting her husband. So in this rendition, the husband is Doug. He's an 80-year-old man with Alzheimer's. He's been in the unit for a week, and his wife has been looking after him for the last 8 years. And it's been a difficult and demanding journey. I mean, he hasn't been aggressive, but he's been critical of her particularly, and it's been tough going. So she's been worn down with the whole process. She's exhausted, and she's decided to have a week's break for the first week that he's in the facility. So she's organised for her son, Bob, to visit. Bob's not usually very reliable, but this week he's been good. He's visited twice. And also a couple of neighbours from either side of the fence that he used to, Doug used to speak to these men on either side of the fence. They actually came in and visited. So he's actually had quite a good week. You've heard through the grapevine, you haven't visited yet, but you've heard that he was fine when they visited, and they took him for a walk outside, and, he hadn't sort of remembered that he was actually just there for the night to adjust his medication. That's the rendition that you'd given him. But he was wondering when he was going to go home, but none of that had been addressed by the visitors that had visited. They'd just, diverted him. But anyway, you knew that you were going to have to address that at some point, but not quite yet. This was the first visit. So anyway, you'd heard through your friend Anne, who visited. She visited 3 times, which is a lot, I know, in a week. But the thing is, she'd been good friends with Doug, all their lives, 50 years. You were married and you'd known her since school times. So basically, for the last 50 years, she'd seen him at least once a week. So they were good friends as well. So when he saw her, he was quite happy with that. But anyway, you were going in now after the first week of him being there, and you were a bit on tenterhooks, how is he, and how's it going to be? But when you get in there, you're pleasantly surprised. You go in there, he's sitting at the newspaper reading, the activity coordinator's reading the newspaper. He's sitting there. He's already found a friend, the next door neighbour guy has been friendly to him, so they go around together all day. He's sitting next to him, and he's listening to the newspaper, and he looks chirpy and alert, actually, at least as much as what he was at home. So anyway, you just decide to sit there and just wait until the newspaper reading's over, so at least, and to observe. Actually, yes, that was your plan. You wanted to be able to observe, pick up as much as you could. You knew that was important. Just take it all in quietly, how he's going, how he's communicating, how he's fitting in, the routine of the unit, the other residents, the staff. Just quietly, step by step, absorb. I mean, this is going to take some time, maybe even months, to be able to get the whole gist of it. But just today, really, the whole thing was to orientate yourself as much as anything. After all you'd been through, you felt, you only had that much energy left, so you had to just sort of spread it out nicely. Okay, so anyway, the newspaper reading's over. Anyway, then they start to do the exercises, so you think, oh good, another, 20 minutes, I'll just sit here and quietly twirl my finger and my foot and whatever else they're doing. The other relatives seem to be doing that, joining in. So you did the same, whatever you could. A bit of a stiff shoulder. It wasn't easy on that side, but you give it a go. Actually, you were beginning to feel a bit chirpy yourself, to be honest, because, you'd been having to drive everything and do everything and motivate everything at home. But here, you weren't having to do any of that. You could be a participant, a few exercises and twirl the foot, and all the relatives were smiling at you, obviously knew it was your first time here to see him, or word of mouth seemed to have got around, so you'd smile back, and you were beginning to think, well, maybe this is not so bad, you were sure that if he'd been angry, that's what you were concerned about, that he would be angry, you know, that he'd be aggressive, and then all the problems that come with that would be huge. But he wasn't that. He was actually, looked quite, I mean, he was a nice man. He'd been a nice man for all their marriage. He'd been a lovely man, good to the kids, good to the neighbours, good to the community. But with the dementia, he'd just become a bit sort of, not aggro, but just sort of verbal, you know, verbal aggression and no appreciation, no acknowledgement of the efforts you made. And so, yeah, it was just sort of an empty sort of a feeling for you in the relationship. But I mean, yeah, and difficult to live with because you couldn't really have a conversation with him too much. But here, it seemed that, you know, he was saying one or two things to the friend that he was sitting next to, at least, you know, one or two comments you couldn't hear, but it looked like he was having a good time. So anyway, he was doing the exercises quite well. And then he looked out, the corner of his eye, he saw you. So you just waved away, thinking he'd come straight over to you, which he didn't do. He just carried on doing the He just carried on doing the exercises, you know. Wow, well and truly, you know, not institutionalized, but it almost looked like it. But yeah, in the routine, so to speak, he'd obviously been doing that every day. So he just carried on. And anyway, so at the end of that, there was morning tea. So you thought, oh, well, I better, you know, make a move at this point. So there was a spare seat on the other side. So the friend was sitting with Doug, then there was a spare seat on the other side, thankfully. So you just went and sat there, and he was happy to see you, you know, or, you know, chirpy. You had a cup of tea, and then and he introduced you. This is my friend. I mean, didn't give the name, but this is my friend. You knew that friend lived next door because on the moving in day you'd met him. So that was good. I think they'd both been stockbrokers or something, similar industry. They talked about cows and horses, and they were into stock, and so that was their main, you know, topic of conversation. So that was a good point. You just registered that. You'd bring in some books maybe of, you know, go to the library. Not the library. The books might get ripped up. You'd go home and look through the library and see what books you could bring in on livestock, and then coffee table books, and then, yeah, you'd forgotten about that, and then have them in the room, and then both of them could enjoy flicking through them, you know, at the kitchen table or dining table or whatever. So, okay, you had that noted. And then you were sitting there and you were thinking, actually, this is a bit easier than what I was anticipating, like maybe even relaxing, like, what do I do now? Like, everything's sorted. The activities coordinator came over. She was very friendly and nice and pleasant. So she introduced herself, lovely girl, and she gave me a monthly calendar, which was very good. So I just went through all that with Doug, what was coming up and what was on and what I'd be coming to. And he didn't seem to register too much about, you know, needing to go home or wanting to go home or all those problems that I know other people have. He just didn't seem to have those problems. Gosh, you know, I mean, I suppose he missed me, but I don't know really. But anyway, I just joined in with it. I said, okay, so I'll come for the movie, you know, that movie that's, you know, your movie, special movie spot. On a Tuesday, I'll come every Tuesday for that. And Thursday, bingo, I don't mind. I'll come to bingo on Thursday. And I said, how would that be to Doug? He said, good. So I just went to the movies on Tuesday and played bingo on Thursday, and then on the Saturday my friend Anne came along, and we took him out for the day, you know, took him out for lunch and a walk at the beach, and that was the routine from then on, and it worked out really well. And so, wow, that was fantastic. It was actually a positive experience. I didn't expect it to be a positive experience, but it actually was. And I think having everything in place, you know, in advance, and moving in there with his green chair and his picture of the farm and meeting the man next door, and, you know, the regular visits, and it all worked out. And I was settled too. You know, I could see him regularly. I could see he was settled. He wasn't aggressive in there. He wasn't even complaining like he had to me at home. So it was a positive outcome. I know other people have lots of difficulties, but for me, thankfully, it wasn't so bad. So this is just not a likely scenario, but a scenario that can happen. So thank you for your views and your likes.